The first red flag was the coffee. Jess always made a huge pot in the morning and left me a mug, but on Monday, the machine was cold and clean. When I asked, the woman who looked exactly like my roommate just shrugged, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Oh, she said, her voice a near perfect echo of my best friend's. I'm more of a tea person now. I'd just gotten back from a weekend visiting my parents, a long, boring drive that had me craving our familiar morning ritual. For the 3 years we'd lived together, that first shared pot of coffee was our sacred time. It was where we dissected our weekends, complained about work, and generally prepared ourselves to face the world. Jess called it our caffeinated debrief. To see the coffee maker, a gleaming chrome beast we'd chipped in for, sitting spotless and unused felt wrong. It was like coming home to find a window boarded up. Tea? I echoed, forcing a laugh. Since when? Did you have some kind of spiritual awakening this weekend? She was leaning against the counter, holding a mug of steaming water with a little white tag hanging over the side. She looked like Jess, right down to the ridiculous fluffy socks she only wore in the house and the tiny chip on her front tooth from a roller skating incident in college. But the way she stood was different. Jess was a sloucher, always leaning into things as if for support. This woman stood with a ramrod straight posture, a stillness that felt practiced. Something like that, she said, that faint, cool smile still in place. Just felt like a change. I dropped my bag by the door, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Maybe she and her on-again off-again boyfriend, Mark, had another fight. Jess sometimes got weird and withdrawn after they argued. She'd retreat into herself and reemerge a few days later with a new haircut or a sudden, short-lived obsession with baking. Maybe Tea Person was this week's version of that. Okay, weirdo, I said, trying to inject some normalcy into the room. Well, I'm making coffee. The real stuff. Want some for old times' sake? No, I'm good. She took a delicate sip of her tea, her eyes fixed on me over the rim of the mug. There was an unnerving quality to her gaze. It was flat, analytical. As a social worker, I'm used to observing people, to picking up on the nonverbal cues that tell you what's really going on beneath the surface. Jess's eyes were an open book. They danced when she was happy and clouded over when she was sad. This woman's eyes were like polished stones. The week that followed was a slow, creeping accumulation of rawness. Each inconsistency was small enough on its own to be dismissed, but together they began to form a terrifying mosaic. The music in the house changed. Jess loved loud, unapologetic indie pop, the kind of stuff you could dance to while doing the dishes. Now, the apartment was filled with quiet, ambient classical music that set my teeth on edge. When I asked her about it, she just said she was expanding her horizons. She forgot things. Not big things, but the small, shared intimacies that bind a friendship together. On Tuesday night, we were watching a trashy reality TV show we'd been following for weeks. The villain of the season, a woman named Tiffany, came on screen. Oh man, I can't stand her, I said, grabbing a handful of popcorn. She has total pick-me Stacy energy. Pick-me Stacy was our stupid inside joke, a name we'd given to a girl from our university days who was notoriously desperate for male attention. We used it all the time, but the woman on the couch next to me just gave me a blank look. Who's Stacy? She asked. The popcorn in my mouth turned to cardboard. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, for her to burst out laughing and say, "Gotcha." But she just kept watching me with that same placid, questioning gaze. You know Stacy, I prompted, my voice feeling thin. From Dr. Albright's econ class. The one who faked a sprained ankle to get a guy to carry her books. A flicker of something not recognition, but calculation passed through her eyes. Oh, right. That's Stacy. God, I'd totally blocked her out. She turned back to the TV, but the moment had shattered. Jess would never forget Stacy. We'd just been laughing about her a month ago. My heart started a low, anxious thumping in my chest. I told myself I was being paranoid. She was just tired. Stressed. It had to be. The physical tells were even more subtle, things I felt before I consciously registered them. Jess was left-handed. She ate with her left hand, wrote with her left hand, gesticulated wildly with her left hand when she was telling a story. On Wednesday, I watched this woman chop vegetables for a salad, the knife held expertly in her right hand. It was so fluid, so natural, that for a second I questioned my own memory. Had Jess always been right-handed? It was a crazy thought. I knew my best friend. I knew her better than anyone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every strange interaction, every glitch in the matrix of my life. The coffee, the music, the joke, the knife. It felt like I was losing my mind. Was I projecting? Was I so stressed from work that I was manufacturing problems at home? I got up and padded into the living room, needing a glass of water. As I passed her bedroom, I noticed the door was ajar. A thin sliver of light cut across the hallway floor. I'd never seen her sleep with the light on. Jess needed absolute darkness, a borderline sensory deprivation chamber, to get any rest. My hand was on the doorknob before I even knew what I was doing. I pushed it open, just a fraction. She was asleep in bed, but she wasn't alone. On the nightstand, propped open, was a laptop. The screen glowed, illuminating a page filled with text. It was a social media profile. It was my social media profile. She had been studying me, scrolling through years of my photos, my tagged friends, my check-ins, my stupid, mundane life updates. A cold dread, heavy and absolute, washed over me. This wasn't stress. This wasn't a fight with Mark. This was something else. Something terrifying. The dam of my denial broke on Friday. I was looking for my favorite pair of running shoes, which I kept in a storage ottoman at the foot of my bed. They weren't there. I started digging through the mess of old blankets and winter clothes, getting increasingly frustrated. My hand brushed against something cold and stiff. I pulled it out. It was a small, brown leather wallet. Jessica's wallet. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Why was Jess's wallet in my room? I opened it. Her driver's license, with her familiar, goofy smile, stared up at me. Her credit cards were there. A crumpled $5 bill. A movie ticket stub from 2 weeks ago. I frantically dug deeper into the ottoman. Beneath a thick wool scarf, I found her car keys. And then, my fingers closed around the cool, smooth glass of her phone. The world tilted on its axis. There was no innocent explanation for this. None. Your wallet, your keys, your phone, that's your trifecta. Your lifeline. You don't just misplace them, and you certainly don't hide them in your roommate's ottoman before you decide to become a tea person. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. It was dead. I sprinted back to my room, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I plugged it into my charger, my mind a whirlwind of static. The woman in the other room, the one who looked and sounded like my best friend, was an impostor. The thought was so insane, so utterly deranged, that I felt a hysterical giggle bubble up in my throat. This was the stuff of bad movies, not my quiet life in a boring suburban townhome. The phone screen flickered to life. The lock screen was a picture of me and Jess at the beach last summer, arms thrown around each other, squinting in the sun. A wave of nausea hit me. I knew her passcode. It was the year her favorite band formed. I typed it in. The phone opened to her messages. My stomach plummeted. There was only one new message, a text sent to my number last Saturday afternoon, while I was still at my parents' house. It was a message I had never received. It must have been sent and then immediately deleted from my own phone. My blood ran cold. The only person who could have done that was the impostor. She must have gotten into the house, found Jess's phone, and used it to cover her tracks. With a trembling finger, I opened the message thread. It contained two words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Not Jess. A second message appeared right after. She has my phone. Don't believe her. Get out, Maya. Don't come home. I dropped the phone on my bed as if it had burned me. The air was sucked out of my lungs. Every weird detail from the past week clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The coffee, the music, the forgotten memories, they weren't quirks. They were mistakes, flaws in a performance. The woman sleeping in the room next to mine was a stranger. A predator wearing my best friend's face. And the real Jessica, God, where was the real Jessica? A floorboard creaked in the hallway. My head snapped up. I could see her shadow under my door. She was standing right outside, listening. Panic, primal and absolute, seized me. I had to act normal. I had to pretend I hadn't found anything. My life, and maybe Jess's too, depended on the performance of a lifetime. I quickly shoved the wallet, keys, and phone back into the ottoman, buried them deep, and stood up, smoothing my clothes. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I walked over and pulled open my door. She was standing there, a laundry basket in her hands. She was already dressed, her hair pulled back neatly, wearing a pair of Jess's yoga pants. That cool, unreadable smile was on her face. "Hey, sleepyhead," she said, her voice smooth as silk. I was just about to throw a load in. "Do you have any darks?" It was the most mundane, domestic question in the world, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to scream, to claw my way out of this nightmare. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had to find out what she'd done. "Oh, yeah," I stammered, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. "Let me just grab them." Living with the imposter, I started calling her not Jess, and my head was a masterclass in psychological torture. I was a prisoner in my own home, under constant, subtle surveillance. I had to go to work, pretend everything was fine, and then come back to the apartment, knowing I was sharing my space with a monster. She was a chillingly good mimic. She'd clearly studied the real Jess for a long time. She knew what time we usually ate dinner, what shows were on our DVR, even how Jess organized the spice rack. But her performance was like a higher resolution photo with a few dead pixels. The longer you looked, the more you noticed the flaws. She'd hum songs Jess had never heard of. She'd use words I knew weren't in Jess's vocabulary. Once, she mentioned a trip to Portland, but the real Jess had never been west of Chicago. When I gently pointed it out, she covered it flawlessly. "Oh, you're right. I was thinking of that documentary we watched. Silly me." She was always silly, her. Her goal, I slowly realized, wasn't just to replace Jess. It was to get close to me. She started asking questions about my job. As a social worker, I deal with vulnerable people, custody cases, and sensitive information. She'd probe for details, feigning empathy. "That sounds so tough, Maya," she'd say, her eyes wide with fake concern. "Tell me more about the Harrison case. The one with the insurance payout. It just sounds so fascinating." I'd give her vague, sanitized answers, my skin crawling. Was this about money? Was she after one of my clients? Or was it something more personal? The not knowing was a slow poison. My first attempt to get help was a disaster. I waited until not Jess was in the shower, the fan whirring loudly. I locked myself in my bathroom, turned on the tap, and whispered frantically to a 911 dispatcher. My roommate has been replaced. I breathed into the phone, the words sounding insane even to my own ears. There's an impostor in my house. I think she's hurt my friend. The dispatcher was patient but audibly skeptical. An impostor, ma'am. Can you describe her? She looks exactly like her. But it's not her. I found my real roommate's phone and she texted me. Suddenly, the shower turned off. The bathroom fan sputtered to a stop. Silence. Then a soft knock on the door. Maya. Not Jess's voice was sweet, concerned. Are you okay in there? You've been running the water for a while. My blood turned to ice. I have to go, I whispered to the dispatcher and hung up before they could reply. I flushed the toilet for good measure. Fine. I called out, my voice trembling, just feeling a little sick to my stomach. Oh, no. Do you need anything? She asked, her voice using a sinister kindness right outside the door. No, I'm good. I'll be right out. I leaned my head against the cool wood of the door, my body shaking uncontrollably. She'd heard me. Maybe not the words, but she knew. She knew I was on the phone. The game had changed. From that day on, her watchfulness intensified. She was always there. If I went for a run, she'd decide to take up jogging and join me. If I had to work late, she'd pack me a dinner and surprise me at the office. She started helpfully cleaning my room, tidying my desk, going through my things under the guise of being a good roommate. She was looking for Jess's phone. I knew it. I had rehidden it, tucking it inside the zippered lining of an old suitcase in the back of my closet. Every time I came home, I would check, my heart in my throat, terrified she'd found it. I realized I couldn't rely on the police. Who would believe a story like this without proof? My roommate started drinking tea wasn't exactly a smoking gun. I was on my own. I had to get out, and I had to find a way to expose her. My plan was simple and probably stupid. My parents lived 3 hours away. On Friday, I told not Jess that my mom had had a fall and I needed to go home for the weekend to help out. It was a lie I prayed she would swallow. Oh, Maya, of course, she said, her face a perfect mask of sympathy. Don't you worry about a thing here. Is there anything I can do? No, I've got it, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'll just pack a bag and head out after work. This was my chance. My go bag was already packed. It had Jess's phone, a burner phone I'd bought with cash, a change of clothes, and all the money I could pull from an ATM. My plan was to drive not to my parents' house, but straight to the nearest state police barracks, away from the local cops who might just dismiss me as a crank call. With the phone and the texts, maybe they would finally listen. That afternoon at work was agony. Every email, every phone call felt like a countdown. When 5 p.m. finally hit, I practically ran to my car. As I pulled up to our building, I saw her. Not Jess. She was standing by the front door holding a travel mug. Thought you might want some tea for the road, she said with that terrifyingly placid smile. To keep you warm. My stomach clenched. Oh, wow. Thanks. You didn't have to do that. Of course, I did. We're friends, she said, pressing the mug into my hand. Drive safe, okay? Text me when you get there. The words "we're friends" felt like a physical blow. I nodded, unable to speak, and walked past her into the apartment. I grabbed my bag from my room, my heart pounding. This was it. I was almost out. As I walked back towards the front door, she was standing in the middle of the living room, blocking my path. Her smile was gone. Her face was cold, her eyes hard as granite. You're not going to your mother's, are you, Maya? She said. It wasn't a question. I froze, my hand clutching the strap of my bag. What are you talking about? Of course I am. She took a slow step towards me. I called the hospital your mother volunteers at, just to see if I could send flowers. They said she was leading a tour group this afternoon. Not a scratch on her. She tilted her head. Funny, isn't it? My carefully constructed facade crumbled. My breath hitched. She knew. Where is she? I whispered, the question tearing from my throat. Where is Jessica? A strange, cruel smile touched her lips. She's safe. For now. She was just so trusting. It's a shame, really. People like that are so easy to lose. She took another step. She gave me everything. Her keys, her passwords, her life story. All it took was a little bit of kindness. A sob story about an abusive ex. She even let me stay here for a few hours while she went to the store to get away from him. When she came back, well, things had changed. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. This woman, this parasite, had slid into our lives on a wave of sympathy and stolen everything. What do you want? I asked, my voice shaking. You're the one who has what I want, she said, her eyes flicking down to my bag. I believe you found something that belongs to me. A phone. So that was it. The text messages. The only piece of hard evidence I had. I don't know what you're talking about, I lied, my mind racing, looking for an escape route. The door was behind her. The window led to a 3-story drop. Don't lie to me, Maya, she hissed, the friendly mask completely gone, revealing the predator beneath. I've been patient. I've played the part. But I am done playing. Give me the phone, and we'll figure out what happens next. Don't, and I can promise you, Jessica will pay the price for your mistake. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The fear was still there, a cold, hard knot in my gut, but it was joined by a white-hot surge of rage. This creature had taken my friend, my home, my safety. I wasn't going to let her win. My eyes darted to the kitchen counter, to the chrome coffee maker that had started it all. The full glass pot from the brew I'd made that morning was still sitting there, cold. Fine, I said, holding up my hands in mock surrender. It's in the kitchen. She didn't believe me, but she was curious. She followed as I walked slowly towards the kitchen, keeping a few feet between us. Where? She demanded. In the pantry, I said, pointing. On the top shelf. It was a lie. As she turned her head for a fraction of a second to glance at the pantry door, I moved. I grabbed the heavy glass coffee pot and swung it with all my might against the side of her head. The sound was a sickening thud. She crumpled to the floor without a sound, a dark bloom of coffee and blood spreading on the linoleum. I didn't wait to see if she was breathing. I grabbed my bag, wrenched open the front door, and ran. I didn't stop running until I was blocks away, my lungs burning, my sides aching. I finally stumbled into a brightly lit 24-hour diner, collapsing into a booth, shaking and sobbing. It was only then that I pulled out the burner phone and called the police. The aftermath was a blur. The police found her, unconscious but alive, in our kitchen. They found the real Jessica, drugged and tied up but alive, in a storage unit on the other side of town. The impostor's real name was Catherine, a con artist with a long record of identity theft, fraud, and God knows what else. Her motive was apparently a complex insurance scam connected to one of my old cases, a detail the police are still unraveling. She'd needed to get close to me, to my files, and replacing my trusting, kind-hearted roommate was the easiest way in. It's been 6 months. Jess is in therapy, and she's getting better, but she's not the same. The open, trusting light in her eyes is gone, replaced by a guarded watchfulness I know all too well. We don't live together anymore. The apartment held too many ghosts. I live in a new place now, one with 3 deadbolts on the door. Catherine is in prison, but it's not the end. The police told me she was part of a larger network. That's the part that keeps me up at night. The knowledge that she wasn't some lone wolf, but a soldier in an army of ghosts who can wear the faces of your friends. I find myself watching people now, really watching. I notice the little details. The way a person holds their fork, the cadence of their laugh, their drink of choice. Because I learned the hard way that the biggest monsters don't have claws and fangs. They come to you with a familiar smile and an unfamiliar taste in coffee, and they ask you to let them in. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. We appreciate everyone and can't wait to bring more stories your way.